Hi, welcome back to my channel. So today we are going to look at the digital lenders regulations. There's a press release, okay, that has been issued by the Central Bank of Kenya to publicize regulations for digital lenders. By digital lenders, I mean digital credit providers and commencement of their supervision. So before this, the digital lenders or the digital service providers, the lenders, they were not regulated by the CBK for the obvious reason that they didn't form part of um, the the banks, for example, those with high income institutions and they don't like take deposits, so it was quite a debate whether or not the CBK was mandated to regulate such institutions, which provide loans to people because they are mostly low income. So that was the argument, but now we see that the CBK has actually decided to regulate the financial and digital credit providers in Kenya. So the press release reads as follows: The Central Bank of Kenya announces the publication by legal notice number 46 of March 18, 2022 of the Central Bank of Kenya Digital Credit Providers Regulations 2022. The regulations were issued pursuant to sections 57.1, 57.3, and 57.4 of the Central Bank of Kenya Act. They provide for the licensing and oversight of previously unregulated digital credit providers. The regulations are now operational. So we see here that the regulations are they are now operational as we speak. The regulations seek to address concerns raised by the public given there is a significant growth of digital lending, particularly through mobile phones. These concerns relate to the predatory practices of the previously unregulated digital credit providers and their abuse, their high cost of interest, unethical debt collection practice, the abuse of personal information collected from their consumers. So the regulations provide for entirely the licensing, governance, and lending practices of these digital credit providers. They also provide for consumer protection, credit information sharing, and outline the anti-money laundering and combating the financing of terrorism obligations of these institutions. These regulations have been developed through a consultative process, okay? The Central Bank of Kenya Amendment Act 2021 came into effect on December 23, 2021, and the Central Bank invited public comments on the draft regulations up to January 21st, 2022. Consequently, in accordance with Section 59 of the CBK Act, all previously unregulated DCPs are required to apply to CBK for a license within 6 months of the publication of the regulations. That means 6 months from now, by September 17, 2022, they should have applied for license, or they should stop operating. The licensing requirements can be accessed in the regulations. CBK will continue working with all stakeholders to ensure that the regulations work for and with Kenyans and in line with best global practices. So you can see that the hammer of CBK, so to speak, is finally landing on these digital credit providers, and it's some will say it's about time. Some will argue that it is going to stifle the industry and discourage this business. But let's just look at the regulations and see what is going on here. We'll just peruse through them. because I'm sure there are so many, but what we are concerned about is basically to have what do you call it, to look at the conditions for license, the application for license, what other terms or what other code of conduct, if there's any, is provided for their behavior, okay, for their carrying out of business, any penalties for violation, maybe suspension of license or termination of license. We look at those things, okay. So let's just look through them. Now, these are the regulations. They are the Central Bank of Kenya Digital Credit Providers Regulations 2022. That's the title. The regulations shall not apply, of course, to any bank, any microfinance institution, any SACCO, any savings bank of Kenya Post Office, any credit arrangement that is not forming part of these institutions, digital credit providers, an entity whose digital credit business is regulated under any other written law. So uh, all this, the first thing the regulations start off is to show which organizations do not, which institutions will not be regulated by these regulations, just to remove them out of the way. So to avoid conflict of laws, of course, and conflict of regulations, if there is any such thing. Okay, so let's just jump because we can't go through the whole thing, it's not long, but it's also not short, and we have so many things to. So licensing of digital credit providers, that is what we are concerned about. What is the process, okay, that is required of them to apply for license? So a person shall not establish or carry out digital credit business in Kenya or hold himself as such unless he is licensed by the central bank. Now, that is the hammer I'm talking about. Let's look at this. A person who wishes to carry out digital credit business shall apply to the bank for a license in form CBK DCP1 set out in the first schedule. We will look at this form later. Let's move on to the application process. The application is gonna be accompanied by, wow, so many things. Number one, the certified copy of certificate of incorporation. So this means that whoever wants to practice as a digital lender must be a company, and they need to show the certificate as accompaniment or proof of their incorporation. And it's a certified copy, of course, not the original, a certified copy of memorandum and articles of association of that company, notification of the applicant's registered address, of course, a certified copy of memorandum, articles of association of any corporate body that has a significant shareholding. So even shareholders or people who raise capital for that venture of credit provider, they also must uh, um, they must also be accounted for. Like, you must show the memorandum and articles of that shareholding company. Okay, a certified copy of the constitutive documents of an incorporated that has significant shareholding. So in case of any other organization that is not a company registered under the law, it means that as long as they have a significant shareholding, maybe they raise capital, maybe they provide financing for the to enable loans and all this, they must also uh, provide their documents, okay? Their documents that constituted that body, like the bylaws, for example, if there are any such, any other documents. A description of the information and communication technology system to be used in the applicant's operations. So there must also be a description of information and communication. This description of the information communication technology system, you must account or say which technology you're going to use. You can't be what do you call it, cunning about the kind of technology you're going to use in your operations. Um, and you must give assurance on the system. For example, assurance that they're not gonna be abusive, they're not gonna be uh, they're not gonna be tricking consumers into maybe automatic decision making or other kind of data protection regulations in the Data Protection Act, the principles and of consent and all other things, and privacy. So moving on. Uh, a description of delivery channels or platforms to be deployed. So there shall also be described a delivery channel or platform to be used by the applicant to deliver their services. Okay, is it by mobile? Is it through M-Pesa or Safaricom's app? How are they going to give these loans? Okay, a description of and terms and conditions of credit products and services which the applicant intends to provide. So there'll also be a description of the terms and conditions which they make the consumer adhere to or sign or agree to. An agreement with a telecommunication or other service provider for provision of the channel. Like I said, if you have an agreement as a credit provider, a digital credit provider with maybe Safaricom, then you will also attach that agreement. The applicant's anti-money laundering and combating the financing of terrorism policies and procedures. So you'll also attach policies in your application and procedures that your business has come up with to regulate or prevent money laundering or financing of terrorism. The applicant's data protection policies, of course, this is fundamental because one of the main concerns of the digital credit providers was that the abuse of data, personal data of their consumers. So they must also attach and protection policies and procedures. Then that's followed by the applicant's consumer redress mechanism, policies, and procedures. How is a consumer going to seek redress if they have any issue or complaint or their right has been infringed in any way? How are they going to seek redress? There must be some policy for this. A description and evidence of sources of funds to be invested in the applicant. So which funds are going to be invested, which sources of the funds. So all this is important just for the sake of ensuring the money is not terrorism, financing, or money laundering by some vague sources. So a non-refundable application fee. So there's gonna be an application fee which we'll look at in the second schedule. The names and addresses of the shareholders in Form CBK, DCP1 set out in first schedule. So there must also be names and addresses of those people who have raised capital for that business, okay? Duly filled fit and proper forms for the directors, chief executive officer, and senior officers, and significant shareholders in Form CBK, DCP2, and Form CBK, DCP3, respectively. So there are several forms here. We are going to look at them because there are forms required to be filled other than the application form. such as that of the shareholders who have invested in the venture, and other forms for directors and CEO, senior officers, and significant shareholders. So the applicant's credit policy, code of ethics, and market conduct. This is important. How will they issue loans? What happens, or what do they do when a consumer refuses to pay in the required time? What channels are they going to use, and those things? The applicant's pricing model and parameters, that is the interest rate on the loans they issue. The applicant's corporate governance policy, certificate of good conduct, tax compliance certificate, and credit reference bureau report for each of the digital credit providers, individual significant shareholders, directors, chief executive officers. So this is trying to filter out any crooks or crude, not crude, like any strange or weird characters who become senior officers, or who just come up with this business venture, for some other shady reason. So every person, or every director, every shareholder, every executive officer has to account for their conduct, good conduct, certificate of good conduct, tax compliance. So it's filtering out any gangs, like the type of gangs you see, in the movies, who loan sharks, who become loan sharks, and they hurt people, cut their fingers off if they fail to pay, such thing. So the act is trying to, okay, that is extreme, but you never know. Okay, you never know. So it's just to make sure the people who are forming this business are legit, and also to avoid tax avoidance through these schemes. Now, a sworn declaration signed by every officer specified in the application. So there's gonna be a sworn, a sworn declaration, which is gonna be signed by every officer as specified in the application form. Any other information as may be required by the bank. So you can see here, this is not a joke. So an applicant is supposed to be a company incorporated under the Companies Act. So already there's a strong system here of regulation, starting with the entity, the type of business itself cannot just be any kind of unincorporated or unregistered entity. It already has to be regulated by the company laws of Kenya, and also has to pay the tax, company tax, corporate tax, and all those things. So it's heavily regulated. And then after that, you also have to now be regulated by this Central Bank of Kenya. Ensure that its significant shareholders, directors, chief executive officers, and senior officers meet the fit and proper tests set out in the third schedule. So even the people, the members of that business venture, are gonna have to be filtered, vetted, just to make sure they meet the fit and proper test, which we'll look at. A person who contravenes paragraph 1 shall be liable to the penalty, which is gonna be prescribed. Okay. Now the bank. Okay, I think let's first look at this license application requirements. They mentioned the first schedule and the second schedule. Let's look at the application form. Um, copy of the certificate of incorporation, credit business, and there's okay. So let's look at the form CBK DCP1 in the first schedule. Okay, so this form is in the regulations in the first schedule, form CBK DCP 1 under rule 423, rule 4 subsection 230. Now, application for a license to conduct the business of a digital credit provider. This form should be submitted, duly completed, accompanied by the complete set of documents required, which we looked at. Now, the first number one is name of digital credit provider. So, for example, you write Tala there as one of the examples. Physical address of head office. You will write the street number, the building, the town, postal address, postal code, telephone number, PIN number of the company, email address, date of incorporation, when it was registered, certificate registration number, this and this, former name or names, if any, by which the digital credit provider has been known, particulars of shareholding, name of shareholder, that is a table with columns, name of shareholder, second column, postal address, PIN number and identification number, incorporation or registration details, number of shares held, name and address of beneficial owner of shares. So you can see here clearly what it's about. You have the particulars of shareholding, then particulars of officers. For example, we have the directors. Excuse me, please. Name of proposed director, that is column 1, age and nationality, proposed capacity, either executive or non-executive, ID number, qualification, academic and professional, postal and email address, telephone contact, experience or previous employment, other current directorship, if he has any, he's a director in any other organization. Now, attach all necessary supportive documentation. Please indicate non-applicable where requested details are not applicable. So we'll have the particular of officers, particular of shareholding, name of proposed senior officers, their age, proposed occupation, ID number, qualification, postal and email address, telephone, experience, other current position. Okay. Attach all necessary supportive documentation. Please indicate NA where requested details are not applicable. Names of the proposed digital credit providers. So we'll have the names of the proposed digital credit providers. We start with bankers, branch and their address, name of law firm and their address. Okay. Name of corporation secretary and their address, sources of funds for the proposed business. Okay. So number 9, you indicate the sources of funds for the proposed business. Also, you must indicate the digital, whether you hold or have ever held any authority from supervisory body to carry on any business activity in Kenya or elsewhere. If any such authority has been revoked, explain why. So they'll ask if you have had any application to any supervisory body before this one. Now, has the digital credit provider been put under receivership in the past? Or were you declared bankrupt at some point? Were you declared insolvent? Or made any compromise or arrangement with its creditors to pay their debts because you couldn't pay them in full? And if so, you explain why. Has the digital credit provider been the subject of investigation by a government agency during the last 3 years? So the question is, have you been investigated by CID or any other agency in the last 3 years? If yes, you explain. And then it's followed by, lastly, the declaration. We, the undersigned, being directors of the digital credit provider, declare that to the best of our knowledge and belief, the information contained herein is complete and accurate. We also certify that the capital to be invested in the digital credit provider, excuse me, yeah. We also certify that the capital used is not from process of crime. So the director is the one who swears this declaration because he's the senior officer. So the director's name, you write the director's name, the signature, date, two directors, okay? They sign and they date. So that is CBK Form 1, okay? Uh, all right. And then remember we said that the application should be accompanied also by a fit and, sorry, I meant the directors and the senior officers have to pass the fit and proper test. So that kind of vetting is done in Form CPK DCP2, which is in the second schedule. Okay, so fit and proper form for directors, chief executive officer, and senior officers. This form should be duly completed, accompanied by the complete set of documents required under Part 3 and submitted to the bank. Okay, so digital credit provider, number 1, name, the type, proposed position, personal information, surname, other names. Okay, previous names, if any. Reasons for change of names, if you had a previous name and changed it. Year and place of birth, nationality, and how acquired, personal identification. So this form is for the CEO, for directors and senior officers. They must fill this form that to show their identity, their nationality, their PIN number, their card, what do you call, their address, their education qualifications, professional qualifications, the name of the bankers during the last 5 years, responsibilities of proposed position. So it comes with the duties as well. Employment or business record, description of past and present activities in Kenya and abroad. My God, this is going deep. Shareholding, directly owned or through nominees. Um, if there are any shareholders, directorships, company's name, certificate, registration number, executive, membership to professional bodies, borrowings. Have you ever defaulted in your financial obligations in the last 5 years? If yes, you explain. Have you at any time been convicted of any criminal offense in any jurisdiction? If so, you give particulars of the court in which you are convicted, the offense, the penalty imposed, and the date of conviction. So you can see here, everything is accounted for. You explain if you have ever been arrested before and convicted for any criminal charge in any jurisdiction, whether you have been disqualified under any legislation or regulation from acting as a director or as a manager. Have you in any country been dismissed from any office or employment, whether you were fired before or been asked to resign from employment or a position of trust? Have you ever been diagnosed as being mentally unfit or of unsound mind? Have you ever been adjudged bankrupt? Have you ever been convicted of fraud or theft by a court of law in any country? Has any entity with which you are associated as a director, shareholder, or manager in any country been in financial distress? Okay, you explain why. Indicate names, postal address, postal and email, telephone numbers, and positions of at least 3 referees. So you require 3, okay, referees who can attest to your professional and personal integrity. They must not be relatives and should have known you for at least 5 years. Is there any additional information which you consider relevant for the consideration of your suitability, okay, for other position to be held? And then it's followed by a declaration. I am aware that it is an offense to knowingly provide any information which is false or misleading. I am also aware that omitting material information intentionally shall be construed to be an offense. I certify that the information given above is complete and accurate to the best of my knowledge, and that there are no other facts relevant to this application of which the bank should be aware. I undertake to inform the bank of any material changes to the information provided herein. So you can see, then you sign name, position held, date, this day of this, sign. It must be signed in the presence of the witness, witnessed before me, commissioner for oaths, or a magistrate. Name, signature, address, date, and stamp. Uh, so, as you can see, no stone is being left unturned. So there's also a fit and proper form for significant shareholders. So it's basically a description of your details, if you are a company or if you are a natural person, past and present activities in Kenya or abroad, source of funds, declaration of source of funds. You must swear, okay? You must provide a sworn statement that the funds that you as a shareholder would like to invest are not proceeds of crime. So then you certify that the information is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge. Okay, then you date and name and witness before me, either commissioner for oaths or magistrate. All right. The fees, we said you pay a fees in your application. The fees for application for a license are 5,000 shillings on the granting of a license, and annually thereafter 20,000 shillings. So the license is renewed every year by paying 20,000 shillings, but the first time application is 5,000. So you can see here, okay, so you can see that it's very straightforward, and the accompanying documents are those we have said, the forms, fit and proper test forms, and the application form, okay? And it's very interesting, to be honest, given the fact that this whole thing, this whole atmosphere was unregulated before, and now there are all these requirements for accountability and fit and proper test. All right, so it's quite excuse me, it's quite important to see the stark difference between this before and now. What is the status quo? Now, licensing, that is the application. So if that is under Rule 4, that is what is important for me. Okay. So the bank, after receiving that application, and if it is satisfied, can continue and issue and grant the license to the applicant within 60 days of submission of a complete application. So the process doesn't take so long. It's 2 months, okay? And the bank considers the following things to help their decision whether or not to grant the license. It will look at the history of the applicant, okay? It will look at the professional and moral suitability of the persons proposed to manage or control the digital credit provider. So it will look at all these things, the moral suitability, professional of the people who are senior officers, okay, who are shareholders, the history of the applicant, the sources and evidence of funds, are they process of crime, are they clean money, the public interest, okay. Um, those are the four conditions or criteria. The bank may grant a license to an applicant who meets the requirement, of course, subject to conditions as the bank can consider necessary. The bank can publish the name of every licensed digital credit provider in the Gazette and in the bank's website within 30 days of granting license. So it's quite public. Through the Kenya Gazette, anyone will know if a service provider, credit, what do you call digital credit provider is legit or not. Through you can access their website. Let me just check the CBK website. I'm sure it's not yet there, but I just wanna see the, do you call it, the website, CBK website. So the website is centralbank.go.ke, and it has it has this very nice things: investment, forex, news, tenders, careers, multimedia, credit, invest,